Hello, everybody. My name is Axel Hoagland. I'm here to talk to you about Bitcoin. Going to give you some background about the problem that Bitcoin solves. Then we'll talk about what Bitcoin is, why it's important, should you own some, and if you should, maybe how much to consider. So before we can talk about Bitcoin, we have to talk about money. So what exactly is money? Or maybe a better question is, what problem does money solve? So money is a way to store economic value that you have generated through labor. So, yeah, if you think about just two people, right, money, instead of having money, you could have an IOU system. So, right, for example, if you build a fence for me and you could pay me $100 for building the fence, or you could just say, you owe me one fence. And a year later, um, you know, I I could pay you $110 due to inflation, or you could just pay me back by building me an equal size fence. So, one of those ways, the money way, has inflation built into it. The other way, the IOU does not. But the IOU system does not work when you're trying to deal with 8 billion people. So that is why we have money. But again, money does not store value good through time due to inflation. So just a note for everybody, money used to be backed by gold. That was ended in 1971. And, so I have a joke that, I say money is backed by bombs. But, even that's not fully true because if the people who are holding the money decide that there's something better than your money, even the bombs aren't going to help you. So the problem with fiat money loses value to inflation over time. The government is running $1 trillion plus budget deficit every year. I think it's actually down to like $1 trillion every 3 or 4 months. So, we're at about a $3 trillion deficit a year. Um, so currency devaluation, right? If you look at the little graph here, the minimum wage in 1964 was 4 silver quarters. So back in the day, quarters were actually 90% silver. So it's a little old, but in 2023, five silver quarters was worth 21.55. But 5 quarters is worth $1.25 still. So um, again, the money is broken. That is the problem. And the thing is, the money has always been broken. So even when money is made out of silver, you see the government will still manipulate it. So if you look back in historic times, the Romans, this was over hundreds of years, but they would issue silver coins and then they would pull them, back in, melt them down, dilute them so they have less silver in them, issue, more coins with the same face value but less silver, and so they're worth less, causing inflation and eventually, the collapse of the Roman Empire. So this is something my dad always said. He said, "The truth heard one time sounds stranger than a lie heard 1,000 times." And frankly, the truth is, inflation, people complain that this and that party are causing it, or taxes, or tariffs, or whatever. But the truth is, inflation is caused by government money printing. That is the only thing that causes inflation. There's only so many goods that are possible to be produced by the limited amount of resources in the economy. And an infinite amount of dollars cannot create more goods, it just creates inflation. So inflation has been a lot worse in other parts of the world. So Argentina has seen 100% inflation for the last 15 plus years. Venezuela had hyperinflation. Germany post World War II. Sri Lanka had a currency collapse. And you'd say, well, those places aren't here. And just because it hasn't happened here yet doesn't mean it can't. Just a few years ago, we were all hit by 10% inflation and everybody was really anxious about that. So, right, think about if we had 100% inflation. Okay, so now we know, now that you understand the problem, now we can talk about Bitcoin. All right, so again, to reiterate the problem, unlimited printing of money leads to inflation and loss of store value. Bitcoin has a fixed supply of 21 million Bitcoin. This ensures scarcity and prevents uncontrolled inflation. So we have so you might think 21 million, that's not a lot. How are you going to make transactions with that? So that's true. Luckily, each Bitcoin is divisible into 100 million Satoshis. So this allows for a more precise transaction. So today, $1 is about 700 Satoshis. And once Bitcoin hits $1 million, then one Satoshi will be worth 1 cent. So this fixed supply prevents inflation and preserves value over time. So one of the important things in Bitcoin is the blockchain. So what the blockchain is a decentralized ledger. A ledger is just a thing that tracks ownership, and then the blockchain is a decentralized ledger. So that means it's stored amongst many entities. So just a quick description about how Bitcoin transactions work. So if I want to send you money through a bank, right? You send money through the bank kind of verifies the transaction, but there is no bank in Bitcoin. It's decentralized. So how a Bitcoin transaction works is you submit your transaction to the mempool. So I say I want to send you $10 worth of Bitcoin. That transaction sits in the mempool, and everybody else in the world is all sending their transactions to the mempool. And only about 1,500 to 2,500 transactions can happen at any one moment. And so transactions are processed in a block of transactions, it's called. And so this is where the miners come in, if you've heard of Bitcoin miners. So what a miner does is a miner has to solve a complex equation. And then once a miner solves that equation, it's very easy for everybody else to agree that that miner has solved the equation, and that gives the miner the opportunity to pick which transactions are going to be included in the next block. So each transaction has a fee associated with it, much like a Visa credit card. So people don't realize this, but you pay Visa 3%. Well, actually, the stores and stuff pay Visa 3% to process Visa transactions. That's how Visa makes money. And so same with the miners need to make money. So you pay them a fee. It's less than 1% usually. And so they process the transaction, and they also get a block reward. So currently, the block reward is 3.125 Bitcoin. And so this is not new Bitcoin, to be clear. There are what I would call these are unlocked Bitcoin. And so there's 21 million Bitcoin that will ever be produced. And right now there's about 19 million that are unlocked. And again, each 10 minutes, 3.125 more are unlocked. So that's the miner's revenue plus the fees. And again, about every 10 minutes, the miners process a new block of transactions. But it could take up to an hour, could take 5 minutes. It all depends on how quickly they solve the equation. So I want to make some comments about crypto or altcoins. So many people have heard there's 10,000 different coins in the world. What makes Bitcoin special? So there's a couple things. As I mentioned, Bitcoin solves one problem. That problem is store value. Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency, and it had what I would call a fair launch, meaning that none of the coins were pre-mined. So the guy who invented Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, who nobody knows who he is, he didn't give himself a bunch of Bitcoin at the start. He had to also start mining, and he shared the program with just a few other people on his in his chat room, and they all were mining at the same time and processing transactions amongst each other for no value at that point. It was just to start the system. For alternate coins or all these other coins, since they don't solve the store value problem, they need to solve a different problem. And so that problem, they have to make up a problem to solve. And usually they're going to, I don't know what kind of problems they make up to solve. They make up tons of problems. And, um, really, when you're solving a problem, what you should be considered is a company. And so most of these coins are really just unregistered companies, and they're more like buying shares in a company than buying a store of value. And so, a lot of times what happens is, these companies, if I create an Axel coin, I keep 50, I just give myself 50% off to start with, and I give some friends another 25%. And then, maybe I make some mining operation that lets people get a little bit over time, but then, I'll sell, a ton of my coins at any one time and make, a bunch of cash. And so, the goal for those people is to get more dollars. The goal for the Bitcoin space people is to get more Bitcoin. So in conclusion here, about crypto and altcoins, I would basically say don't buy any other coins except Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a store of value. Other coins, ask what problem are they solving? And the answer is probably not a problem that needs to be solved. Okay, so talking about how to buy Bitcoin. So the absolute easiest way to buy Bitcoin is on a brokerage account through the Bitcoin ETFs. So that would be like Charles Schwab or Fidelity. Not Vanguard though. Vanguard does not offer Bitcoin ETFs. So if you have a Vanguard account, you should message them and tell them that you want to be able to buy Bitcoin there. So what's shown here is just a handful of Bitcoin ETFs. You can see I have 5 listed here, but there's about 15 of them available by tons of different companies. Most of them have a expense ratio of 0.25. That's not that high, but it is a little bit of a cost. A different option for buying Bitcoin is you can purchase it via apps like Strike, River, or Cash App, and you can buy the Bitcoin directly from them. There is usually like a 2%, 1%, or 2% fee when you buy it, just like any foreign currency transaction. There are tons of other apps that you can buy Bitcoin through, so like Robinhood, PayPal, Coinbase. The problem with these apps is they offer a ton of other coins. So like I just mentioned, there's Litecoin, Ethereum, Ripple, Bitcoin Cash, etc. This adds more confusion. It creates an opportunity for people to make a mistake and buy the wrong coin. So I generally say do not buy Bitcoin through these other apps. Buy it through Cash App or River or Strike. Out of the 3 I start with recommending to people. Okay, so that's kind of where we are with Bitcoin. So where could Bitcoin go in the future? So if you look at all the goods in the world, the total assets comes out to about $750 trillion. A lot of this is in real estate, you can see. A lot of it is in bonds, stocks, gold, etc. So there is an idea called a monetary premium in some of those things. So the easiest way to explain monetary premiums is to think about a house in Canada. So if you're a Chinese investor and you don't trust the Chinese government, you need to get money out of China. Well, the Chinese government does not let you just export, ship $1 million outside of China. But something that you can do is you can buy a house in Canada, and that is okay. And so, let's say there's a nice Canadian couple who wants to buy a house in Canada. They've saved up $200,000 and they want to borrow $600,000 to buy this $800,000 house in Canada. Well, this Chinese person, they have a different goal than the house buyer. They want to store their money, so they're willing to pay $1 million for this house in Canada. So the difference between the 800,000 that people are willing to spend on a house and the $1 million is $200,000. It's called, this is an example of the monetary premium. And so, it's hard to establish exactly what that is. But if you just think about all the rental properties, they all have some bit of monetary premium on them. And so that's just for real estate. Now, if you think about the stock market, stocks have a monetary premium. You can see this demonstrated when interest rates go down, stock market goes up, right? Because people are looking for return. Um, so, again, I can't tell you exactly how much monetary premium is in the stock market, but there's definitely some. Bonds are just a store of value. We haven't talked about this yet, but bonds are not a very good store of value. So, the U.S. government is printing trillions of dollars a year, and so even though your bond is paying you 4%, the actual inflation rate could be 5 or 6%, and so bonds are actually losing you value over time. Gold also has a monetary premium associated with it, right? So gold has some use cases as far as jewelry or software, computers. But again, there's some percent of the gold's value is monetary premium. So if I take a guess at the monetary premium in all those things, we're guessing that's about $273 trillion, and that monetary premium could all be stored in Bitcoin. And so if you take that $273 trillion divided by 21 million Bitcoin, that gives Bitcoin a valuation of $13 million per Bitcoin. So, just looking here, when you're thinking about investing in Bitcoin, obviously, people know that Bitcoin's volatile. Sometimes it goes up really quickly. There are occasions where it goes down. So you can see in its down years, it's down, 70, over 50% every time. And certainly there's even times within those years, when it has a 300% increase that it could have a 50% decrease in the middle of, sometime in the middle of the year. So just like any investment, stock market or anything, you need to consider the downside, but you also need to consider the upside. So, for example, today Bitcoin is $100,000 a coin, and I'm telling you, I think there's a likely possibility it goes to 13 million. So one option, right, is you could buy $10,000 worth of Bitcoin today. For some people, that might seem like a ton, but for a lot of people, $10,000 is a fairly reasonable amount. And if Bitcoin gets to $13 million a coin, that 0.1 Bitcoin would be worth 1.3 million. Maybe 10,000 is too much. Maybe you only have 5,000, so you buy 0.5 Bitcoin, and that gives you 650,000 when Bitcoin hits, at 13 million. So, the point here, right, is, giving yourself the potential upside while, avoiding too big of a downside. Just another thing with Bitcoin is like any other investment, right? You shouldn't be trying to time the market. If you think Bitcoin is a good investment, or if you're convinced by this, what I talked about today, what you want to do is buy a little bit and learn more about it. Don't go buying your whole portfolio in Bitcoin because I told you so, because that is not what I told you to do, right? I'm here to advocate for you to learn more yourself. I have a bunch of references that I can give you on where to learn more. But another thing that you shouldn't do is don't go buy $100,000 worth of Bitcoin tomorrow, and then Bitcoin falls 50%, and then you sell, right? You've kind of missed the point. So put only what you're willing to lose into Bitcoin, and if Bitcoin goes down, you should see that as a buying opportunity. And I think about this for all investments that I have, right? It could always go down 50%. And would I still be okay if that happened? And if the answer is no, don't make that investment. So some comments about adoption of Bitcoin. The United States, Trump has signed an executive order to have a Bitcoin strategic reserve. El Salvador, Bitcoin, it is legal tender there. So you can go to McDonald's and buy a burger with Bitcoin. Bhutan has been mining Bitcoin for years from their excess energy. Pakistan just recently announced that they're going to start mining Bitcoin and have a strategic reserve. There are two states, New Hampshire, three states, Arizona, New Hampshire, and Texas, that have all signed Bitcoin strategic reserve laws. So they're all working on, purchasing more Bitcoin. And there's one state in the U.S., Roswell, New Mexico, that has a strategic reserve. So their Bitcoin was given to them, but still start. There are tons and tons of companies buying Bitcoin. This just shows you the top, I don't know, 20 maybe companies that have Bitcoin. So as you see MicroStrategy, um, or it's now called Strategy, they have the most Bitcoin, almost 600,000 Bitcoin. But then there's lots of other companies, right? Marathon Digital Holdings has 50,000. Tesla's on there with 11,000. Coinbase has 9,000. Block, which is Square, like the payments processing company, they have 8,000. And if you look at the right news, you'll see that every day there's a new company buying Bitcoin or multiple new companies buying Bitcoin. So final thoughts here. Bitcoin is a solution. I see Bitcoin as a solution to the broken money that is causing tons of problems throughout the world. I haven't talked to you about all the problems that I think fiat money causes, but let's just say if there's a problem that you've identified, I at least believe it's partially caused by fiat money. Risk reward, investing in Bitcoin could give you a high return, but it also is very risky. So again, only invest what you can afford to lose and start small. If you're unsure about investing in Bitcoin, start with, $10 or $100 and, minimize your downside risk. Keep learn about all the things I've said here. And, I believe that your confidence will grow over time.